around the U.S. The U.S.'s natural disaster calendar to find properties. So that's one strategy. I'd say a second one is industrial catastrophes. So in a sense, the Flint, Michigan issue is an industrial issue, the lead in the water. But another one in Florida was Exxon Valdez. I think that was Florida, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another one where that wasn't just Florida, that was Louisiana. It affected a number of areas, and those properties that would have been beachfront and where the owner would have been like, oh my God, I'm out of business, I'm not going to be able to do this.
Yo, what is up? This is Christian D. Evans, host of Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. And I just want to share with you real quick, thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. It really means a lot to us, but also our community. And, if you like this, please share this with your friend, your family, a colleague, someone that you don't even like. Definitely share that with them. And then also leave a comment and a review for us. We really do appreciate that. And show our guests some love if you find that this episode really resonates with you. Secondly, also want to share with you some really awesome news. I've had the Fortune Opportunity Network and have incredible guests, 8 and 9 figure entrepreneurs, CEOs, and founders on our podcast. And what we've done is we've actually been able to open up a Be Uncommon, if you can, mastermind, where we're able to open up the door for so many of you, right? Those that are 6-figure, 7-figure entrepreneurs that are scaling, that are struggling, that really want to level up their game, their business, their life, whatever it is. I'm able to open up that door for you with this Be Uncommon If You Can mastermind. Now, we're only taking a select few of individuals. So what you'll need to do is go to christiandeevans.com/mastermind-now. And the link is actually in the description as well. Guys, that is christiandeevans.com/mastermind-now. We're only opening this up for a select few of individuals that really want to level up their game. You have a conversation with me, see if you qualify. And guys, enjoy the episode. And remember, be uncommon if you can. Cheers.
Thank you so much for tuning into Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. I'm your host, Christian D. Evans, and we have a Harvard and Dartmouth-educated entrepreneur and CEO of a multi-million-dollar real estate company. She is a business and money expert, a former Fortune 500 executive, and the founder and CEO of My Smart Cousin. Now, her goal is to help Black and brown folks, and especially women, understand their money, increase their accountability, and build generational wealth through real estate and education. My friend, please welcome Pam Hill. How are you doing today, Pam?
Doing great. Thank you so much for the generous welcome, Christian. I'm super pumped to be talking with your audience.
Well, Pam, I'm really excited about it as well, because one of the things I really want to emphasize is, I think we all can agree that, Black and brown individuals have a disadvantage in the real estate market, whether that's through education, whether that's through, bank offers, loans, things like that. And I really want to just ask you, if you don't mind me asking, just being authentic, how were you able to overcome those challenges and still be able to accomplish the things that you've been able to accomplish?
Absolutely. So growing up, I grew up in a working class Black neighborhood full of good folk, but certainly people who had lots of things on their mind. And one of them was not investments of any kind. So even as a kid, I thought about how it was that I could be a light in this world and help folks to really start to think about their future and how they might think about investment as a part of that future. So I started off with investing in the very traditional approach that most of us do, which is a mix of stock, bonds, and these days crypto as well. But real estate always had a hold on me. I saw growing up folks lose homes. So parents who left an inheritance to their child, then that child, probably through no fault of their own, just not really understanding what it takes to focus on that. And so they ended up losing it. And so real estate is just one of those fundamental things that I think folks need to make sure that they own, for sure, Black and brown folks, as you mentioned, because of historical disenfranchisement, but also it's just good for everyone. It's good for the country. When the pie is bigger, everyone does better.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because, obviously you didn't grow up with all, a silver spoon in your mouth, right?
Definitely.
And I love to talk, Yeah, so talk a little bit about that, because I think a lot of times, because of race, because of racism, whatever it may be, right? We have this misconception like there are certain things that I can't control, and that's fine, but you obviously overcame that. And that's why I really want to emphasize like being able to talk to those individuals that are
Yep.
facing those situations, and how were you able to overcome that? What did that look
Yep.
like? What was your
Yep.
mindset? What was your mentors? Who were you able to connect with?
Absolutely. I'd say mentor number one really would have been my parents. And they wouldn't have known it at the time, nor would I. But as I kind of look back and think about how even at 8 years old, when my parents bought their first home, and it's the very same house that they still have. And that neighborhood was unfortunately not a great school district. So my mom was a little pit bull and made sure to sadly have to have me bus, but fortunately have me bus. So that's the first mentor are my parents. Second would be teachers, right? You always have to give a shout out to whoever the teacher was that made a big difference. So for me, in high school, I had a teacher who said, Pam, I know how much you love music because I was a music major. I went to the High School of Performing Arts, which is the Fame School. I was in Fame, me and half the school. But he said, I know that you can do more. So he's the one who got me thinking about Ivy League. Once there, it was a mind blower because Dartmouth is everything that Jamaica Queens is not. Jamaica Queens is gritty and very brown and short on cash, but high on always looking at ways to make a way out of no way. And Dartmouth had a little bit of that as well in terms of folks figuring out how to do more with what little they had. But for the most part, it was lots of private school kids. Very daunting, actually, for me when I got there, because immediately I thought, am I good enough? But, after a while, I realized I am good enough. And so mindset for me is just a combination of three things. One is momentum. Keep the momentum going, and you will always be able to move on to the next step. Second is gratitude. So just taking time to write down the one or two things that are awesome for you that day. And then third is proof. So remembering what the proof points look like, because it happens so fast and it's easy to overlook that. So write down the proof points so you can see that you're making progress.
And I love that. And I appreciate you sharing that. So now let's talk a little bit about, like, obviously being able to scale, go from that, rough neighborhood and to being able to scale to a multi-million-dollar business.
Yep.
What attracted you to the real estate market specifically? And at what point did you start really kind of like saying, okay, this is my game. I love this game, and really, dominate it?
Yep. So what attracted me specifically were the returns. So during the Great Recession, so about 10 years or so ago, my husband at the time we were dating, he was looking to buy a house in Wilmington. And so we just started looking at all kinds of houses. And in looking, we came across houses that were extremely low price, meaning like the $20,000 neighborhood. I was flabbergasted, and once I saw it, I couldn't look away. So that's what got me interested. Is when I went through these neighborhoods, I saw that they were good, solid neighborhoods, and I've yet to find a neighborhood, even the worst neighborhood, has people who either have to live there or want to live there, and you will never go without customers, I feel, in the real estate business. So that's what got me interested in this particular niche of the house, a house for the price of a car, is the returns. When I say returns, what do I mean? So if you buy a house for 25, maybe you got to put 15 in it. That's 40. These days, you're definitely not going to rent it for less than 1,200, but let's just say only 1,000, right? So that's a less than 4-year break even. And you probably are not going to need to. I mean, you certainly can, in order to juice the returns, get some financing, but it's not as if you have to, that you can't make the deal pencil without financing. You absolutely can. So that's the reason that I love these kinds of opportunities. I'd say there are three things I tell my tenants when they are looking to rent a house. And I also tell my clients around real estate investment. One is the landlord themselves. So if the investor is going to be the landlord, making sure that they distinguish themselves, or if they're hiring a property manager, that they do that. Second is the house. The house needs to be not a mansion, but certainly high quality. Third is the neighborhood. Now, with my tenants as well as with investors, I can't always control the neighborhood, but I can help you learn how to improve a neighborhood that is there. So, for instance, I'm active. Reaching out to the police captain if I hear that there's been something that's gone on. If one of my tenants says, "Hey, Pam, you know what? This old broken down car has been sitting forever." I call the city, I call the licensing department. So I think that's the combination that it takes.
I love that, because now let me ask you this, because when you're talking about these houses, right? A lot of individuals, and definitely in today's world, the interest rates are low, but the
Yep.
prices of houses are extremely high. And what I find so interesting when I talk to people that are either even beginning or intermediate, there's always this misconception that I always need a bank and money, right? And the reality, I want to get kind of, maybe you give it as an example of a deal that you had take down because you just being resourceful, and you just found a way. And it's like, hey, I didn't have the money, I didn't have the capital, I didn't have the loans, but I figured out how to acquire this property with ABC, right? So give us an
Yep.
example of something resourceful. I love that.
Okay, so I would say, first of all, to the folks out there who are saying that they don't have the money to do this, you've got the money. Let me tell you, the cheapest house that I bought was $2,500. I'm talking a house with 4 walls, a roof, a floor. Okay, it needed some work, right? I couldn't just say, let's stroll on in and move in here. But you can make it work, right? You might need 20,000 on a house like that. And again, within a hand, less fingers than are on one hand, that house is going to be juicing back returns for you. So I think the real resourcefulness that folks need to tap into is within their mindset and within their persistence. So they've got to be willing to just, I won't say grind as if, hey, it's a 24-hour journey and that's all you do, but you've got to believe, and you've got to know that you can do this. There's a quote, I think it's Nelson Mandela, who says, everyone thinks something is impossible until it's done. And that's the vision that motivates me. And I'd say that's what folks who are listening to this and saying, well, gee, Pam, how am I going to do this? You've got to dig within yourself, put together your plan, your business plan, and then if you need, get yourself a partner, and then just start looking for all the great places where these houses sit.
Mhm. So with your strategy, do you focus a lot on single family? Are you doing duplexes? Are you doing, fourplex and above, commercial?
Yep.
What does that look like? What is your strategy that you found is most
So
effective?
when you're at that price point, so for me, house for the price of a car, for the 25, I think it is 25 houses that I own, 31 units. They are well, first of all, they were all bought for $35,000 or less. And even including the house that my husband and I are in. So if folks are like, should you even eat your own cooking when it comes to this? We're in a good neighborhood, a suburb of Philly. And after a while, you kind of hone in on what you really want. I have definitely lived in my share of very fancy houses. And at this point, what I want is just stacking up that real estate, and making it make money for me. Now, as far as the flavors of houses, to your question, for me, it is principally single family, as you can imagine, at that price point, but not exclusively. So I have a 4-family that's got a commercial enterprise, a small commercial enterprise on the first floor. That was, I think, $26,000. I bought a triplex for $18,000. A 2-family was 35. And then most of the rest are single families. So you can do a real range. Hopefully your listeners know, and if not, if you don't own a home out there, folks, and you want to get into the real estate investment game, the first way I'd say to start is by making use of good old Uncle Sam, who's got a very long pocketbook, or long list of things that he's able to offer you, so that you can buy a multifamily house. Multifamily houses will qualify for FHA financing, a regular old residential mortgage financing, as long as it's 4 units or less. So that's a fantastic way to break in.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot of different ways. Now, let me ask you, because creative financing right now is just booming. Everybody loves to talk about it. Everybody's thinking about it. And I love your approach, because I understand just the way like margins are. Sometimes you're talking some pretty tight margins in real estate. Definitely if you have more like a debt to equity ratio, like a debt to like cash flow ratio, it's like, okay, well, how much cash flow is this producing? And my debt is really high. And right now, because of the real estate market, because the prices are so inflated, it's so interesting, because it's like there's really small, and I shouldn't say there's no deals, because there are definitely deals, but you just got to have the trained eye to understand what is a good deal and what is not, like what we're talking about. And obviously you've acquired all your properties with 35,000 and less. Now it doesn't mean that they're worth that. They're worth probably more, but you've acquired them with that price tag, which is really nice. So my question is, when you've been acquiring them, what were certain, did you leverage creative financing? Did you leverage other things? Did you leverage more of like pulling the debt out, refinancing those debt, those real estate, and buying more real estate? What does that look like? What were some strategies that you used?
Okay, so I am unconventional because I'm a cash player. So again, for your listeners out there, it's really a function of your temperament. So let the financing structure that you choose be guided by your temperament. So what I mean by that is my temperament is one that's somewhat conservative. It may not sound like it, given how much investing I do, but it is. And as such, I focus on things that I can buy outright. So there is no need for creative. I've certainly have done my share of creatively financed deals when I worked in the utility industry, but no need to do that here. However, if I were advising someone who said, that's nice for you, Pam, how about little old me? I don't have that kind of wallet, or I don't want to put my money to work that way. I want to take advantage of the interest and other structures, other benefits that come from financing. So what would you have me do? Okay, I'd have you do the following. First of all, I'd have you focus on a larger multifamily, probably a 4-family. Why? Because if you're at my price point of house for the price of a car, and you're talking like a $10,000 or $15,000 house, you're not going to be able to get almost any bank to look twice at you. They're just not interested. It's why should they, right? They can finance a $100,000 house with the same work as a $10,000 house. So that's one. You need to go a little bit bigger. 2, if that is not where you want to start with going with a bigger property, instead then look to bundle. 3 at a minimum. So pull together 3 properties, make sure that they are roughly within the same area. You might even be able to kind of structure them or sell them as a multi-site arrangement in the eyes of the bank, or a government agency like USDA, Department of Agriculture. They also provide financing for multi-site investments. And then obtain your financing that way. If you go the governmental route, be prepared to read lots of paperwork. It takes a while, but it's worth it because there's a lot of financing that's available from those entities.
You've given so much insight. I love that. It's just such an immense value. I do like your, because it's like finding the approach that works for you, because it depends upon obviously your level of risk, right? Because again, I've seen definitely in today's world, you could do a commercial property at an arm of like lock it in at 4 or 5%, but obviously depending upon where this goes the next 5-7 years, interest rates could be triple. And so it's very sad situation. Now, you did mention something that I do want to bring up. It is impacting everybody. And real estate is the number one way to really compensate for this evil thing, which is called inflation. So love to talk about obviously what you see in the market right now, and then as well as how you've been able to leverage real estate to compensate for it.
Absolutely. And as you say, inflation is this evil thing. Why? Because it reduces your buying power. So now with real estate, why is it that real estate has a little tougher skin when it comes to inflation? I'd say for a couple of reasons. One is that generally real estate prices, that is the price of the underlying asset, in other words, the property, those tend to rise with inflation. So that means that the value of your property, once you acquire it, as you think about what is going to drive appreciation of that property, outside of gentrification or some other reason that makes the neighborhood suddenly the hot place to be, it is going to be what's going on in the economy and inflation. So that's one reason to look to real estate, because it's going to rise. But a much bigger reason is for rental properties, and especially if you go with short-term rental, in other words, Airbnbs and their cousins, you are going to be able to reprice almost daily, just depending on how quickly you turn the revolving door with the customers that you have. So that's another reason. You listen to any newscast these days, and they talk about how rent has gone up, and not just rent, obviously the price of food, the price of gas, and so on. So these units are all tied to inflation, and certainly real estate, like utilities, maybe to some extent like gasoline, is a fairly inelastic good. In other words, short of oxygen, you are going to buy it no matter what's the price. Oxygen is, of course, the maximum, but yeah, you're going to be in there. It's not going to be like a luxury good.
So when we're talking about inflation versus, real estate, let's kind of dive into that a little bit further, because see, I do know a lot of our business owners that are listening to this right now, they probably have some sort of cash flow, and they probably have invested into maybe one or two real estate properties because they're like, okay, this is we understand that it's a good place to hold for tax purposes. Now, neither one of us are tax lawyers or anything, so we don't give out tax advice, blah blah blah, that shenanigans. However, though, leveraging inflation, let's talk a little bit more about that, because obviously, people don't understand, because all we see a lot of times is, oh, my price of my property dropped in the value of it. But guess what? That revenue, that cash flow is consistently coming in regardless. And it's a good way to always, increase. And as we all know, like you just mentioned earlier on in our conversation, average rents right now are like $1,200, depending upon where you're at naturally.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Even in low income neighborhoods, rents have gone up some 30-40%. They've gone up fairly significantly. So whereas an average rent, let's say for a 2-bedroom, might have been $800, that same 2-bedroom, you're not gonna be able to find one, I don't think, for less than $1,000 or $1,050. A 3-bedroom that had been $1,000 is now more like 13, 14, could even be 15. So, and I'm not talking, Fifth Avenue, New York City. I'm talking just your regular neighborhoods where teachers and firefighters and what have you are living. And really, as a result, with my tenants, I am always advising them on how they should and can buy their very own house, as opposed to rent from me, because there are always going to be, from my perspective, there's always going to be folks who want to rent. And if for some reason suddenly everybody just says, I want to own, well, then I'll choose a new business. I have no doubt that I will be able to be successful, let's say as a general contractor, which I've done in the past, or property manager or some such thing. So it's for that reason that I don't see it as decreasing my business by advising and helping my own tenants on how they too can get a piece of this American dream. It's because I think they deserve it.
So let me ask you, because I do know the new administration has put out certain laws in regards to taxes regarding real estate. And I do know that has to deal with, not really the beginner level individuals. It's like you're talking about $500,000 or more in assets under management in real estate. And probably that's where you're at and so forth. So I just wanted to get your opinion on kind of what you're seeing in that, what's your take on that? Because I do know certain things that are happening that I've heard like a negative feel and feedback from that specific offer in that tax code.
Right. So I guess I have to say, knock on wood, that at least in the states that I own in, which is Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New Jersey, I have not seen any state and local taxes that are adversely impacting real estate outside of just the normal county taxes that go up a little bit, or city and municipal taxes. And even when they do, I'm kind of two minds of that, because the very first place I look, if someone is telling me in my city in my target location that the taxes are going up, I immediately look to see, well, what is it that that city is planning to do? And might this be a win for me? So I'll give you an example. Wilmington, Delaware is a lovely city, but in my view, it's going to be far lovelier when President Biden becomes former President Biden at some point. I'm not wishing him out of his office, but at some point it'll happen. And he will build himself a presidential library. And guess where he will put it? In Wilmington, Delaware, where he has been the state senator for so very many years, some good 30 years. So if that action of presidential library and better infrastructure, roads, what have you, is what is driving up the taxes, I'm going to trace the dots, thread the needle and see. And then I'm probably going to be promoting them. Yes. And how about over here, do something, and over here, because I know that that's good for my portfolio. So I won't be so short-sighted as to think, what is this? I'm having to pay another $15 in taxes. It really just depends what that money is buying me.
Well, see, that's interesting concept a little bit in perspective, because see, it's more of like you're holding on to that house, knowing that the value of that house will go up. And obviously then with that, you also, your returns will increase as well, because of course now you can increase the rent because people are willing to spend that much money for that area. Now, naturally, you'll have to just make sure you're always in margin with taxes and so forth. But I get where you're coming from. Do you optimize for more of cash flow, or do you optimize for like, net worth and kind of like equity?
No, that's a great question. I'd say I optimize more for cash flow. And the reason why is because the net worth or the equity side with these houses that I buy are really lottery tickets. That's their real asset, and then translating into net worth, since I don't have any liabilities on them. So that's their real value. And when I say a lottery ticket, what I mean is going back to when I mentioned earlier about gentrification. I come from New York City, and Brooklyn has to jump out in your mind when you think about a neighborhood that has gone from rags to riches in terms of the price of houses. Literally, these row houses, they call them brownstones there, but it's a row house. Used to sell probably 30 years ago for, I don't know, 15,000, and now it's 1.5 million. That's same house. So I don't know, and I probably, being conservative, would doubt that any of my properties are going to get to millionaire status. But if they get to $300,000, that's a giant win. So, but that's a long-term win. So that's why I don't optimize per se for net worth. I optimize for the cash flow. Now, that said, I did mention the example with Joe Biden and the presidential library. So I do look, as I'm evaluating other areas where I'll be buying, I look at whether I think that some exogenous factor like the Joe Biden effect or some such thing could lead that market to go up. One that I like, I think a lot of people, kind of say, oh, the time is not right now, is Flint, Michigan. And the reason I like Flint, Michigan is because, yes, they have a water problem, but how long are they going to really have this water problem? Let's be honest, right? At some point, and it's already happening, the government will start cleaning up that water. We're not talking about boiling an ocean here in what it takes to turn it around. And the price of houses in Flint very much are in the house for a price of a car neighborhood. And Flint is not too terribly far from very nice neighborhoods in the Michigan area. So those would be the kinds of factors that I would look at if you want to optimize for net worth. Choose based on what could drive it up in the 5 to 10 year range.
See, and you bring up a really solid point, because I want to share a story, because of what I love what you're seeing is you're very resourceful in the way you think, and you think long term. So it's like, yes, I'm going to buy this real estate, and I know I'm buying it really pennies on the dollar, and I know that maybe it may be 18 months, and I'm okay with withstanding that loss for a while, because first of all, I'm not spending that much money on it. I'm cash flow positive, maybe in 5, 12 months or whatever, that's fine. And as well as you get that concept. So you run the numbers very generically, but then long term, 5 to 7, 10 years, hey, the value of that house is just remarkable. And now you've got massive equity in that, because guess what? You bought it for pennies on the dollar. A story I know is I was literally in Florida last month, Panama City, a few years ago.
Yep,
Yeah, beautiful area. It got
yep.
hit crazy by that hurricane.
Yes.
I never thought of buying real estate right after the hurricane, because guess what? A lot of people did. And it was pennies on the dollar. They were trying to get rid of it. Now, it took them a while to finally redevelop the whole thing, but now it's back up, booming, rock and rolling. And again, it's just those, as a real estate investor, that's where the game gets fun, because now you're not talking small game, you're talking big game. You're like, you know what? I want to acquire all these properties because I know, and I could withstand the loss for a little while. Exactly. Knowing that I can turn that dial around. Now they're $1 million, $2 million properties and so forth. So I'd love to get your perspective on that too.
I agree completely. You mentioned hurricanes, which we know happen sadly with increasing regularity. So you pretty much could just trick or treat around the U.S. The U.S.'s natural disaster calendar to find properties. So that's one strategy. I'd say a second one is industrial catastrophes. So in a sense, the Flint, Michigan issue is an industrial issue, the lead in the water. But another one in Florida was Exxon Valdez. I think that was Florida, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another one where that wasn't just Florida, that was Louisiana. It affected a number of areas, and those properties that would have been beachfront and where the owner would have been like, oh my God, I'm out of business, I'm not going to be able to do this vacation real estate stuff. Yes, you will. Hold on. But if you don't, I'd be willing to buy it from you at a reasonable price. So that's the other thing I would look at. Industrial accidents. Of course, you've got to gauge them, right? Let's say Chernobyl, right? Or what have we had? We have in the U.S. when in PA, when we had sort of our equivalent of that. But like a radiation incident, no, stay away way too long for something to turn around on that. But anything else, I would look at. So I think you're right that the natural human response is to run for shelter, to seek safety, and to not see the opportunities. Even COVID. I mean, all of us can certainly sit and wish that we had bought stock as what was it in March 2020, April 2020, when the bottom fell out. But nobody did that. And the reason why everyone was selling is because that's how humans are structured. Oh no, there's a catastrophe. So maybe you just hang a picture on your wall and just like gaze into that when there's a catastrophe. Opportunity.
Yeah, 100%. And those that did buy during March wish they would have bought more,
Exactly.
It's dark. So, but I definitely agree with that 100%. And it's just so totally different from emotional thinking versus logical thinking. And we can go on the psychology with that so for many years. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about pivoting toward My Smart Cousin. Where did that formulate? Where did that idea come from? And what is that goal? Because I think it's just an awesome mission.
Oh, awesome. So My Smart Cousin is named so because that is what I am in my family. So we have family reunions on my mom's side every year. And so I am that family member who just chases up after an aunt or a cousin or someone and says, hey, remember last year you told me you were thinking about investing in a 401k? Have you opened it? Have you opened your account? How can I help? Or remember you talked about moving out of your apartment and buying yourself a house? So I am that person who both almost takes on the mantle of that responsibility, as well as loves the opportunity to do so. So that's how the name My Smart Cousin came to be. And it's a rather folksy and homey name because I do see myself relating with clients that way, kitchen table finance. So I can certainly talk jargon and get into high financial concepts with the best of them, but that's not the true test of whether someone knows what they're talking about. It's whether they can make a 5-year-old understand it. That's how you know that they themselves have the content boiled down in their head. So that's what My Smart Cousin is all about. And so what we do in that vein is help folks buy a house for the price of a car, be it an investment property, their first, their 101st, or their home sweet home all over the country. So every day when I go online and I'm looking up properties for clients, I see hundreds every day listed in the, I'd say $50,000, $40,000 neighborhood. Some regions, you're never going to find it. Let's be honest. California, goodbye. Hawaii, no. Alaska, forget about it. But other states, hi, Alabama, we like you. Georgia, Pennsylvania, there's a number of places in the U.S. where you can find great deals.
That's awesome. I love it because again, it comes down to resourcefulness and just switching that mindset. Said, hey, you know what? I'm going to focus on where I can find these and obviously deploy an effective strategy. Now, I do want to ask you, of course, with kind of my smart cousin. It's the mission, and as well as kind of share with me also like the results that you have seen because you've been able to leverage your training, your system, because I think this is where it gets fun because you're not really at success anymore because it's like, I've already achieved it. It's about significance. It's about making an impact in other people's lives. And that's why I just love working with people like yourself. So tell me a little bit about like the results that you've seen in people's lives because of my smart cousin.
Absolutely. So the mission of my smart cousin is really around Black and brown folks and women. Not to say that we won't welcome cisgender white guys. We absolutely will, but we know that there are certain voices that are underrepresented, and so we want them to have more, to be more aware, and to have a bigger piece of the pie. So that's the mission. Now, to your point in terms of the results. So the results have been really more than I thought that they would be, to be honest, when I first got started. And so what I mean by that is I've got one client in particular who I think about. I began working with her because she was receiving a Section 8 voucher. A Section 8 voucher is a housing choice voucher. And her housing authority representative was telling her, you're not going to be able to move out of your home and buy something for a while. And long story short is I was able to help her work with that agent to qualify to buy a house using that payment. So instead of the Section 8 money going to a rental payment, it goes instead to a mortgage payment. So that's one. Another that comes to mind, I worked with a young couple and they were looking to get into the investment game. And they just recently closed on a 4-family house. And I helped them to be able to find financing. There's a lot of, I mentioned Uncle Sam, there's a lot of free money that's out there in the way of down payment assistance. So I was able to help them get that from their city. And that helped with the closing costs as well as the fees on the deal. So that's the kind of thing, for me, that's what the success looks like. When I have a person who went from, I don't own a home, to, yay, I own a home. I don't own an investment property, to, now I do.
It just makes it, see, people don't know what they don't know. And it's so interesting. I guess my question is like, why do you think, even in today's world, why individuals in those specific, demographics still struggle at that level? Is it just lack of education, lack of resources? What do you think that is?
Yeah. It's a, boy, is it a complex question, and I'm sure a very complex answer as to why that is. I would say education certainly is a part of it. And education, not just in terms of books education, but education of exposure. Like when I grew up, my parents didn't talk at the dinner table about stocks and bonds and financing, but they talked about bills. So I had a really concrete understanding of the light bill and the water bill, and that I've got to go in person now to pay this because I've waited too late to mail in the check, as an example. But what they didn't, as I say, talk about are just any sort of investments, and it's just because they didn't know. So that's a level of not just knowledge, but it's almost like oxygen. So when you don't have that in your environment, you don't even know to think that way. You're not programmed to expect that out of life. So I think that's one. And probably second is just lack of resources, financial resources. So the Federal Reserve, they did a study a couple of years ago, I think it was, that the average net worth of a white family, I want to say it's around 150,000, and the average net worth of a Black family is $8. And it's stupefying. You're like, how could someone's net worth be $8 on average? Well, I'll tell you how. Because most Black families who fall outside below that $8 have a lot more debt. They have no assets, or their assets will be a car or two that's got a big note on it, and their household effects, which won't be terribly valuable. And then their liabilities will be very long, from school debt to medical debt, to credit card debt. And so on the one hand, you have to see something positive about the fact that people are trying to better themselves with school. But we know that sometimes even these school loans are not the best spent money in some of these programs. So, it's a very complicated thing. But those are just a couple of the reasons why it is.
Yeah, you're bringing up some really good, solid points. We could talk about this for quite a while, but one of the things I see all the time is in those neighborhoods and those demographics, I do know that they're preyed on as well by those loans, those rent-a-center, those things that
Yep.
they just basically take their money with no asset available, really.
Yep.
And again, they. And it's tough because it comes down to discernment. It comes down to having a mentor, someone outside that's saying, hey, you know what, just education and teaching them and having that discipline. And honestly, they just don't. And that's why I think it's just so cool to see this mission here that you've got going on, because you're targeting that audience that really needs it the most. And
Yep.
I know you've seen a lot of traction in that. Pam, how can our audience reach out to you, just be part of your community and just consume some of your content?
Absolutely. Please go to mysmartcousin.com. That's my, M-Y, smart, S-M-A-R-T, cousin, COUSIN.com. And there you will find a ton of resources, from blogs to videos to a free ebook on how to buy a house for the price of a car. And then you can also follow me on Instagram and on Twitter at mysmartcousin. And in terms of support, refer folks. If you yourself are not someone that needs this kind of help, there are folks out there that would make for great clients. Reach out.
Awesome. And guys, those links will be in the description below. So make sure you just consume that. Make sure you literally stop what you're doing, because it's all about action. You can listen to this podcast, but don't ever do anything. And guess what? You're never better off, right? And so to become better off, you have to take action. And so, of course, reach out to Pam, consume some of what she's got going on. And Pam, again, I just thank you so much for the immense value that you brought today. Talking about inflation, talking about your systems, talking about your processes, talking about the mindset switch, and really, the real estate game, and, obviously the impact that you're making in that industry, which is really awesome. Is there any last words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience before we let you go?
Do something. So you kind of hit on it when you said, don't just listen and let the actions slide down to the bottom of the page. Do something. So take this information and act on it. If you haven't begun investing in real estate, it is so rewarding. It is a lot of fun, and you feel good that you are providing something solid for a family. So I highly recommend it.
That's awesome. And guys, that is Pam Hill, and that's Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. Until next time, remember, be uncommon if you can.
Yo, this is Christian D. Evans, Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. We thank you so much for listening to this amazing episode. If you feel and you know that this was valuable to you, please show some love to our amazing guest by liking this, by commenting on this, by making sure that you do a nice 5-star review, and just show some love to our guest. That'd be really awesome. Also, make sure you share this with a friend, a family, a colleague, someone that you believe would bring value to their life right now. And guys, we just want to say thank you again for just being part of our community. If you want to have more resources, don't be afraid. Go to christiandevans.com. You can actually schedule a phone call with me, or you can send me an email at christian.evans@beuncommonifyoucan.com. That's christian.evans@beuncommonifyoucan.com. Always love to hear some feedback, and let me know what is the number 1 or 2 things that you are struggling in your business and your life, and we'll make sure we have those conversations. Guys, that is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. And until next time, remember, be uncommon if you can. Cheers.